I'm joined by Dan Wolf, the Director of State Programs at the Alliance for Digital Innovation here at GovRAMP Cyber Summit, second annual. Great to have you, Dan. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Dan, you bring two interesting perspectives when we talk about GovRAMP and cybersecurity. You are a former deputy CIO at the state of Virginia, so you wear that hat, and then as working for ADI and Director of State Programs, you wear that hat of kind of in between state and local governments and industry. So let's start with the GovRAMP Cyber Summit. What is some of the things that are standing out to you? What are some of those themes that you say really hit home as you kind of continue to talk to state and local governments throughout the country?
Yeah, one of the most important things that when we're talking about GovRAMP is we're talking about collaboration across jurisdictions, right? We're talking about something that really hit home for me when I was still with the Commonwealth of Virginia, which is that, states and localities, at the federal level, everybody thinks that state and localities are always on the same page, right? But the reality is that that can typically be very far from the truth. You have localities that a state government might be very involved with, very active with, and then others that, they really don't want to talk to the state government. They don't want to talk to the state capitol. When they come knocking, they say, "What are you going to make us do?" and don't pay us to be able to do it, right? But so the real benefit of programs like GovRAMP are filling the gaps that can bring people together to the table, both at the state level, the local level, and even at the federal level, and create those shared opportunities, those shared commonalities, and really moving towards an interoperable space where where you're eliminating redundancies and just working off the same sheet of paper.
It's not that cybersecurity is not hard enough as is, so going out on your own, being in your little silo, just makes that challenge even harder. And one of the things, the themes here at GovRAMP Cyber Summit, and it continues, I think, from last year, is that harmonization. From ADI's perspective, why are we still talking about harmonization? What do we need to get there? And now, when you add even the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, the CMMC program from DoD, adds another complexity to harmonization.
Sure, absolutely. And the answer is because it's hard. And when you're talking about something as disparate as the federal government or a state government or even a local government, you think about it at the local government level. You might have a person running the plow and the landscaping, but who is also going to be coming inside and doing some type of project management work, right? And that by themselves, that's one person that has a bunch of different roles. Scale that up to the state level or the federal level, and suddenly you have thousands of different people with very different business needs, very different outcomes, but they're focused on their own little silo and not recognizing where those commonalities exist across. So it goes back to a lot of what I was saying in the previous question, which is that, if you don't have people at the table together, knocking down where those differences are, deciding whether or not those differences are actually meaningful, and figuring out maybe we're 10% different, but we're 90% the same, and we can streamline that in order so that we're not making other people, whether it's our local government, state and local government stakeholders, whether it's private industry, making them have to do additional duplicative work in order to deliver services.
Are you starting to see some progress around harmonization? The conversation has been happening for several years, but what's the progress look like?
Yeah, the progress is, it is moving forward. That is the good thing. I mean, a lot of these topics are very interesting to people, the type of people that you see in this room. But getting people who are focused on education policy or the environment or energy or commerce investments, getting them to understand the need for regulatory harmonization is something that it is to say it's an uphill battle is an understatement, right?
It's not on the tip of their tongue by any means.
Absolutely, but the reality is that cybersecurity is in government services are something that affect all of us, no matter what policy area you're in. It used to be when we first got into doing this, that IT was like this line item on the budget, right? It wasn't the entire thing. Nowadays, government is IT. Technology underpins every single policy initiative that's done by every governor around the country, every mayor around the country, and certainly every administration that comes in. So, the goal of making that go faster, be more cost effective, a higher ROI for government investment, should be something that everybody should grab onto very quickly.
There's words when we talk about harmonization and this idea of trying to get people to going down the same path, even a very wide path, reciprocity, and there's a lot of push for reciprocity. We hear that in the federal world with FedRAMP. I know GovRAMP is starting to make a lot more progress. Well, I guess I'd be interested to hear, let's flip your viewpoint for a second, since ADI, Alliance for Digital Innovation, really represents, it's an industry association, a lot of the vendors. Mm-hmm. What do you hear from industry about their desire for, which is I know great, for harmonization and for this reciprocity? How much can they push more to get the feds or the states to act a certain way?
I think that there's definitely an opportunity for industry to use its voice, use its collective voice on this type of topic. The reality is that it's difficult to do business with the government. Yeah. Look, to a certain degree, it should be, right? It's taxpayer money. We all want, even I, as an industry representative, want my taxpayer dollars well cared for, obviously. So, but what it shouldn't be is something where you're having to do the same homework for every single teacher from whom you take a class, right? And that's what we currently have through, particularly in the SLED landscape, but even in the federal side of things, where you want to go do business with the Department of Energy. All right, there's one person. Now you got to go do business with state, and it's an entirely different set of things. Commonwealth of Virginia, not a GovRAMP participant. State of Arizona is a GovRAMP participant, and the state of Arizona has, made the determination that we say that yes, we can rely on the fact that you have been vetted by a trusted person, and that we will, we may not be completely trusting you. We're going to continue to trust but verify, as President Reagan would have said. But that we are going to work with known knowns, and then continue to keep tabs on things, so that we make sure that we have continuous monitoring.
You bring up an interesting point. I talked to the Governor Mike Braun from Indiana, and he actually signed an executive order saying not only is cybersecurity important, but he also said a third-party certifications like GovRAMP are even more important. I'm just wondering, as you look across the landscape, and every state's different, I get it, but are you seeing that type of, maybe we need to make this GovRAMP thing, release a third-party certification process a little stronger? Is that a theme or a trend at all, or is Indiana kind of out there? They're ahead of the curve.
Indiana is definitely. It's not out of tune with what's going on in the rest of the states, really, because the states have increasingly realized that we are weaker when we're separate. We are better together, stronger. I see it when I go to NASCIO. As my dear friend Doug Robinson would say, you paraphrased him, but if you've seen one state, you've seen one state. So every state will have a slightly different approach to that conversation, but leveraging shared standards is a common theme throughout. Even the states that remain on their own, they're still looking at FedRAMP. They're still looking off of NIST standards. They're not inventing the wheel completely, but they just haven't moved to that next iteration of what that might look like and brought in an outside partner and able to move more quickly. Probably to their detriment, though, because they're stuck in longer procurement cycles as a result.
I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about cybersecurity in the sense of supporting state and local governments. CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, has a grant program. It's not been reauthorized. Congress is waiting. Now, eventually, the hope is that it does get reauthorized, but why is this so important? What benefits have you seen over the last few years that this grant program is driven down to?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the first 4 years of the state and local cyber grant program were really intended to be that starting point, right? It wasn't intended to be something that was going to be around forever, and I think everybody knew that, which is why it had a decreasing federal share over those 4 years. But 4 years just wasn't enough to be able to give states that boost. The real benefit that the SLCGP did was getting states to the table with their local partners, with their tribal partners, and creating that whole of state approach, that whole of state strategy. Some states were doing that already. State of Arizona, my friend JR and Ryan Murray were doing a great job with that leading into that. However, a lot of states needed that boost. But we see cybersecurity as being a matter of national security in 2025, right? And national defense doesn't, the traditional idea of military defense is almost like this moat around the country, right? Well, in the middle, you have all of this critical infrastructure that is predominantly controlled and managed by states and localities or their partners. And, that presents a soft, juicy center for our adversaries. It used to be that they would have to come through our military perimeter to be able to get to that. Nowadays, in a wired world, they don't have to come through the military in order to be able to get to those softer critical targets. So we have significant concerns around, the national security aspects of ransomware attacks on water or transportation grids or public education systems, whatever it might be, public health care. And what level of chaos that can create if we don't, as a country, begin to take this critical infrastructure, cybersecurity, more seriously.
I think one of the challenges is with cybersecurity, and this has always been the big problem, is trying to understand the impact of the money, right? Because you can't prove that something didn't happen.
Yes.
And there was your time, well, why would I invest in cybersecurity when I don't even know if it's working? Well, we didn't get attacked.
Yes.
How do you know that?
Yeah.
Well, we're still here. So do you think that's part of the misunderstanding after all these years of the events and all these problems we've seen and all these attacks, people still don't quite make that connection between the return on investment?
Yeah, and government is often a backwards looking exercise anyway, where you're responding to your previous crisis, right? So a lot of states that have gone through some type of major ransomware event, either at the state or local level, have used that as an impetus to be able to invest. But when you haven't experienced that type of major attack, instead you've just got your CISO walking up with a spreadsheet that said, hey, we stopped these 19 million attacks yesterday. Like, isn't this great? And you're saying, oh, that sounds fake, right? That doesn't sound real. So one of the things that industry is trying to really educate the public sector on is how you talk about the business value of cybersecurity. You don't necessarily talk about it through raw attacks averted, because, like we said, that can just be junk. But the business savings, the cost savings, the cost avoidance that you get from averting a clear attack is something that we can project as an industry pretty well, because we've seen it. We've got the data in order to be able to see those things. So you can go to your legislators, you can go to your oversight committees and say, yeah, we believe that we saved you in the last 6 months $25 million, and here's why. Because these four incidents were likely attacks that would have resulted in X, Y, and Z, and here are the constituent impacts that you would have heard about. And those are the types of real anecdotes that end up being more effective to policymakers versus those huge high-level data.
Dan, this is a good segue to one of the other priority areas for ADI, and this is the idea of sustainable modern IT programs. So maybe talk a little bit about, because if they can prove the value of cyber, adding, hey, if we modernize this legacy system, we get better cybersecurity, it's better for the business. This is all part of that same discussion. What has ADI seen, and how are you starting to push forward this idea of, hey, this has to be sustainable, modernized IT systems?
Yeah, and a lot of times when we talk about modernization, we have to overcome the obstacle of the legislator, the policymaker, the person in the administration, hearing modernization, just thinking that this agency wants something shinier and newer. They want a dashboard, right? They want something citizen-facing. Yes, maybe. However, but modernization is, as you mentioned, it's a cybersecurity investment. One of the most critical aspects of threats that face the public sector today are through the continued use of legacy, often bespoke, sometimes not, legacy applications. It's expensive, because you got to pay somebody to maintain them. But beyond that, you have to be able to patch them. You have to keep them up to date. And if you don't, God help you, because their vulnerabilities are well known, often on the internet for free or for sale, and somebody is going to try to exploit it. And so when we talk about modernization with them, we talk about it from the standpoint of, yes, citizen services, but more importantly, protecting your systems so that they're not exposed. And that's why it's critical to have a sustainable funding model that will empower these modernization programs. When I was with the Commonwealth of Virginia, our appropriation cycle, we had a 2-year budget cycle. So you could be anywhere from 12 months to 36, maybe longer months, in order just to be able to get the funding for a project. If it was a larger project, if you didn't have enough nickels in the couch cushions, right? And that cycle means that you're developing requirements. You're begging for for money from the legislators, and then you're going to market, and you're procuring something that isn't even close to state of the art anymore. You're a couple years behind now at that point, and you've diminished the return on investment, and you've also shortened your own lifespan for that, being able to use that product in both a secure and efficient way. So creating those sustainable funding models that will shorten that overall lifespan and allow state governments to move more effectively and more quickly, to me, it's a no-brainer, and when I talk about it around the country, it resonates greatly with leaders. So
I think a lot of what you're describing is the problems the federal government's tried to solve through the Technology Modernization Fund. That's had limited success for the same reasons. And in fact, that expires in December of 2025. So hopefully they come back around and renew that too.
Absolutely.
Are you starting to see some traction in the state level to create these working capital funds, these IT modernization funds?
Yeah, we have. We worked on a bill in the state of Maryland a couple years ago that got passed. There's legislation that's been pending in Massachusetts. Failed the last session. Was brought back for this session, and we're working with Senators Creighton and Moore on moving that forward. Virginia, they've had a code section on the books for years, but just never used it, much to my chagrin when I was there. But we've been working in order to get some seed capital put into that in order to kickstart things forward. Because the idea is it's not going to solve all the problems. The key is to give another tool in the toolbox for state CIOs.
Sure. Dan, we can talk longer. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so let me thank my guest. Dan Wolf is the Director of State Programs for the Alliance for Digital Innovation. Dan, I really appreciate you taking the time here at GovRAMP Cyber Summit. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, guys.